I planned his wedding. I paid off his debt. I stood by him when no one else would. And when he found someone better, he didn't just break up with me. He sent me a wedding invitation with her name beside his. But I didn't cry. I booked a flight, disappeared, and the day he tried to marry her, everything fell apart. We met in the quietest way. No fireworks, no movie moment, just a rainy bus stop, 2 broken umbrellas, and the kind of smile that makes you believe in second chances. He wasn't the charming type, not the guy who stole the room, but he saw me, not my curves, not my grades, not my history, just me. And for a girl who had grown used to being the backup plan, being seen felt like falling in his sunlight. He didn't have much. A small apartment, a job that barely paid, a pile of debt that made his shoulders sag. But he had kindness, and I was tired of surviving alone. So I stayed. I helped him build. Late nights, studying for interviews. Early mornings, making breakfast before his shifts. I paid bills when he couldn't. Loaned him money when he wouldn't ask. Defended him to my friends who whispered, "He's dragging you down." But I believed in him. I wasn't looking for a man who had it all. I wanted one who'd build it with me. For 4 years, I was the constant. Through job losses, family drama, his anxiety, my burnout. Every time he said, "I don't know where I'd be without you," I smiled, because I knew where I'd be. Right there, next to him. Always. We met in the quietest way. No fireworks, no movie moment, just a rainy bus stop, 2 broken umbrellas, and the kind of smile that makes you believe in second chances. He wasn't the charming type, not the guy who stole the room, but he saw me, not my curves, not my grades, not my history, just me. And for a girl who had grown used to being the backup plan, being seen felt like falling into sunlight. He didn't have much. A small apartment, a job that barely paid, a pile of debt that made his shoulders sag. But he had kindness, and I was tired of surviving alone. So I stayed. I helped him build. Late nights, studying for interviews. Early mornings, making breakfast before his shifts. I paid bills when he couldn't. Loaned him money when he wouldn't ask. Defended him to my friends who whispered, "He's dragging you down." Family drama. His anxiety. My burnout. Every time he said, "I don't know," but I believed in him. I wasn't looking for a man who had it all. I wanted one who'd build it with me. For 4 years, I was the constant. Through job losses, where I'd be without you. I smiled, because I knew where I'd be. Right there, next to him. Always. It didn't happen overnight. There was no big fight. No slammed doors. No cheating. At least not the kind you could see. It was smaller than that. Quieter. It started with his phone. Turned face down. On silent. Always just out of reach. Then came the words. Shorter. Colder. "I'm tired. You're overthinking. It's not a big deal." He stopped asking how my day was. Stopped noticing when I stayed up late to help him finish a presentation. Stopped hugging me just because. And I started making excuses for him. He's just stressed. It's work. Maybe I've been too much lately. But deep down, I felt it. That awful, silent thing. That creeps into a relationship and takes up all the space between 2 people who used to be everything. I tried harder, planned date nights, cooked his favorite meals, left sticky notes on his bathroom mirror that said, "I believe in you." But his responses? Fewer, flatter, like I was a room he once loved, but no longer wanted to walk into. The worst part? He never said it was over. He just stopped arriving. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I stayed. Because love doesn't just leave your body when theirs does. It lingers. Hoping, begging, waiting for a sign they still mean it. It arrived on a Tuesday. A thick envelope. Elegant. Gold-trimmed edges. My name written in calligraphy I didn't recognize. For a second, my heart did that stupid, hopeful thing. Maybe it's a surprise from him. Maybe he's planning something. Maybe he remembered our anniversary. I smiled as I opened it. And then I saw it. His name, in bold, serif font, beside another woman's. I thought it was a mistake. A prank. Some sick joke. But no, there it was. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of him and her." The date? 6 weeks away. The venue? The one I had once said I dreamed of. The color scheme? The exact palette I had pinned to our shared vision board. I couldn't breathe. Not because he left, But because he hadn't even told me, he didn't break up with me. He didn't sit me down. He didn't cry or lie or even explain. He just replaced me, quietly, efficiently, like removing an app from his phone. And the final punch? A note scribbled on the back of the invite. I know this is a surprise, but I hope you'll still come. You've always been there for me. Like I was a guest at a life I helped him build. Like I was an audience member to my own erasure. That night, I didn't cry. I packed a bag, turned off my phone, and disappeared. No bouvier, no die, no last message, just silence. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is leave without a word. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my friends, not my family, not even the ones who would have begged me to stay. Because this time, I wasn't escaping. I was reclaiming. I booked the first flight I could afford. No destination in mind. Just distance. Just sky. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I left behind everything. The apartment we shared. The photos. The gifts. The memories boxed up and abandoned like old furniture. I deleted his number. Burned the invitation. And in the middle of that airport terminal, surrounded by strangers and silence, I chose me. Not out of revenge. Not to make a statement. Not to make him worry. But because if I stayed even one more day, I would have disappeared into myself. They always say when you love someone, you fight for them. But no one talks about the moment. You realize the only fight left worth having is for your own soul. I landed in a country where no one knew my name, where I could start over, where I could walk the streets without flinching at every memory. I bought a journal, wrote 3 words on the first page. I survived him, not because I hated him, but because I refused to hate me any longer. And just like that, the healing began. The wedding day came. Not that I was counting, but I knew. I knew because my phone started buzzing, even though I had deleted, blocked, erased every trace of him. But mutual friends talk. People watch. And the universe? Sometimes it takes its time, but always delivers. The first message came from an old coworker. Are you seeing this? Then another. Check the wedding hashtag. Then another from someone I barely knew. Girl, you dodged a missile. Curiosity won. I looked, and there it was. A live stream of the wedding. Except, it wasn't the fairy tale they planned. The bride didn't show up. Guests whispered. The groom paced. And then, someone leaked the texts. Screenshots. Receipts. Messages between him and several other women. The bride's sister found them. Confronted him that morning. And just like that, the wedding was off. The venue? Canceled. The guests? Furious. The catering? Wasted. The flowers? Tossed. And him? Standing alone in a suit he didn't deserve. My hands didn't tremble. My chest didn't ache. I just sat there, sipping coffee by the beach, watching the disaster unfold on my phone. And all I could think was, you planned a future without me. But it seems the future had other plans. Just empty. Because the version of me who would have clung to those words, she was gone. He didn't miss me. He missed the woman who carried his weight, who patched his holes, who stayed when she should have walked. And maybe that was the real twist. He finally saw my worth. The moment I stopped giving it away for free. I didn't reply, didn't block, didn't even delete the messages. I just moved on. Because not every story needs a confrontation. Not every betrayal needs closure. Some chapters simply end when you no longer need to be in them. I returned 6 months later. Not because I missed them, not because I wanted closure, but because I was ready to walk through the same streets as a different woman. Just empty. Because the version of me who would have clung to those words, she was gone. He didn't miss me. He missed the woman who carried his weight, who patched his holes, who stayed when she should have walked. And maybe that was the real twist. He finally saw my worth. The moment I stopped giving it away for free. I didn't reply, didn't block, didn't even delete the messages. I just moved on. Because not every story needs a confrontation. Not every betrayal needs closure. Some chapters simply end when you no longer need to be in them. I returned 6 months later. Not because I missed them, not because I wanted closure, but because I was ready to walk through the same streets as a different woman. Same city, same coffee shop, same air, but something had shifted. This time, I didn't lower my eyes when I walked past familiar places. I didn't flinch at the memories. I didn't shrink. I met up with friends. Real ones. The few who had stayed quiet when everything went down, but were always ready with open arms. We laughed. We talked about healing, about how sometimes losing everything gives you room to rebuild everything better. And then I saw him, not in some dramatic slow-motion way. No thunder in the background, just a normal grocery aisle, card in hand, looking a little smaller than I remembered. He froze, like he'd seen a ghost. I smiled, not with anger, not with pity, with peace. Because that's what happens when you've outgrown a story. You no longer need to rewrite it. He didn't say anything, just watched me walk past. And I didn't look back. Because the past doesn't need permission to stay behind. It just needs you to keep walking. I didn't write it for him. Not really. It started as a journal entry, turned into a page, then 2, then 5. Words spilled out, not as anger, but as release. You didn't break me. You just showed me how much I had been breaking myself to hold on to someone who never intended to stay. I gave you everything. My time, my loyalty, my softness. And when you left, I thought I had nothing left. But I was wrong. You took what I gave, but you never took me. Because who I am, the woman who loves fiercely, who believes in people, who shows up even when it's hard, that woman survived you. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer I rarely open. Not to be mailed, not to be sent, but to remind myself. I don't need closure from the ones who broke me. I need compassion from the one who healed me. And that person was always me. I stopped waiting for the apology, for the explanation, for the text that says, I see now what I lost. I stopped waiting to be picked, to be redeemed, to be remembered. Instead, I chose mornings that started slow. With coffee I didn't have to rush, and silence that didn't ache. I chose evenings with books, not breakdowns. Walks without destinations. Laughs that weren't followed by questions like, am I too much? I started making plans. Not we plans. Mine. A trip I'd put off. A dream I'd buried. A version of me I'd long silenced. Because someone else couldn't handle her light. I painted my walls the color he once said was too loud. I cut my hair the way I always wanted. I played my music louder. I danced barefoot in my living room. Not because life was perfect, but because I was finally free. Free from proving, from pleasing, from performing love like a duty. I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. I had opened my own eyes, and the woman I saw in the mirror, she was beautiful, brave, becoming. Not because he said so, but because she remembered who she was before she ever had to ask. It was a random Tuesday, the kind of day you forget by evening. Except I didn't, because that's the day he messaged me. Again, I saw your name today. Thought of you. I know I owe you more than an apology. Can we talk? No drama. No excuses. Just that. And for a moment, that old ache stirred. The part of me that used to hold its breath. Every time his name lit up my phone. But now, it didn't shake me. It didn't break me. It just passed. I reread the message. Twice. 3 times. Then I turned off my phone. Went back to what I was doing. Cutting up fruit for a smoothie. Barefoot humming. Because here's what I knew now. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you claim. The day you stop asking why. He wanted to talk. To explain. To maybe rewrite the ending. But I wasn't in that story anymore. I had outgrown it. I didn't reply. Didn't block. Didn't need to. Some silence is sacred. Some doors stay closed. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. There's something sacred about building a life no one handed you. A life you weren't chosen into, but one you chose. No, it wasn't easy. The first months were heavy. Healing isn't gentle. It tears through you before it rebuilds you. But slowly, I began to see her again, the woman I was always meant to be. I started freelancing, created a business I once believed I wasn't smart enough to run, booked my first solo trip, woke up in cities where no one knew my name, and somehow felt more myself than I ever had at home. I met new people, not ones who completed me, but ones who respected me whole. Friendships where I didn't have to shrink. Conversations where I didn't have to explain my worth. Laughter that didn't come with conditions. I danced again. I sang out of key. I wore red lipstick and didn't ask if it was too much. I looked in the mirror and said, "You are not leftovers. You are not what someone got tired of. You're the main character now. And this story is just getting good. And the best part? I didn't have to erase the past. To love my present, I carried the lessons, left the wounds, kept the wisdom. Because what once broke me also built me. Hey you, the girl who waited up at night for a message that never came. The one who held your breath every time he pulled away, hoping if you stayed still long enough, he'd come back. I see you. You weren't stupid. You weren't weak. You weren't blind. You were hopeful. You believed in love the way some people believe in miracles. With all your heart, even when it hurt. You stayed too long, not because you didn't know better, but because your heart had been trained to believe. That love meant sacrifice. And my God, did you sacrifice your time, your tears, your peace? You made excuses. You carried weight that wasn't yours. You poured out pieces of yourself just to keep something that was already slipping. And still, you woke up each day and tried again. Tried to be enough. Tried to be softer. Tried to earn what should have been given freely. But now, look at us. We made it out. Not bitter. Not broken. Just wiser. You don't need to beg to be loved anymore. You don't need to prove your worth in someone else's story. You have your own now, and it's beautiful. So if you're still holding on, still wondering if it was your fault, still asking why you weren't the one, let me say this clearly. You were never the problem. You were simply too golden for someone who didn't know how to hold light. I don't chase anymore. Not people, not apologies, not love that requires me to shrink myself first. I don't confuse silence for peace, or crumbs for a meal, or attention for affection. I know now, what is real doesn't require begging. What's meant for you never makes you question your worth. I speak up. I take up space. I say no without guilt, and yes without fear. I trust my gut. I protect my energy, and I never again apologize for being too much, for someone who is simply too little. I've learned the difference between someone who says, "You complete me," and someone who says, "You're already whole. Let's grow together." Someone who keeps you guessing, and someone who makes you feel certain. Someone who takes from your light, and someone who reflects it back to you. I'm not waiting for a fairy tale anymore. I'm writing my own story, one where I'm not the girl who begged for love, but the woman who walks in already knowing she is love. So if someone walks in now, they'll meet all of me, unfiltered, unfolded, unapologetically whole. And if they can't handle that, that's okay, because I'm not afraid to walk away anymore. Not when I've already learned how to walk alone. It started with a simple, unexpected call, not from the past, from someone new, someone gentle. We had met once, briefly, at a workshop. He remembered my laugh. I barely remembered his name, but he called, just to say he read something I'd written online, that it moved him, that he hoped I was doing okay. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. And for the first time, I didn't panic. I didn't wonder what he wanted from me. I didn't ask myself if I was enough. I was already enough. And he saw that, without me having to prove it. We talked about little things at first. Books, dreams, wounds that didn't bleed anymore but still left shadows. He didn't rush, didn't push. He stayed. And every time he listened, I felt myself softening. Not because I needed to be loved, but because I finally believed I was lovable. He never said, "I'll fix you." He said, "I'll walk with you." And that made all the difference. This wasn't the love I had once begged for. This wasn't about filling a void. This was love that met me where I stood, without asking me to bend first. It didn't come with fireworks. No grand gestures. No sweeping declarations. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a soft blanket after the storm. He didn't ask me about my past until I was ready to share. Didn't question my scars. Only held space for them. He didn't complete me. I was already whole. But he did remind me that being held can feel safe, not suffocating. We built slowly, not on fantasy, but on choice. Conversations that ran deep. Laughter that didn't feel performative. Silences that didn't make me nervous. He never once made me feel like I had to earn his kindness. I didn't have to play small. Didn't have to tone it down. Didn't have to apologize for being powerful, emotional, loud, or soft. And the best part? I wasn't afraid. Not of being abandoned. Not of being too much. Not of being seen. because I had already stood alone. I had already walked through fire. And now, I was choosing love from a place of strength, not survival. So when he whispered, "I'm not going anywhere," I didn't cling. I didn't doubt. I just smiled, because I wasn't waiting for someone to save me anymore. I was building something, and this time, someone simply chose to build beside me. Dear you, the girl who once believed he was it, the one who held on longer than she should have, the one who kept loving, even when it hurt to breathe. You did well, not because you endured, but because you dared to love, in a world that taught you to protect your heart at all costs. You gave in the softest parts of you. You stayed when others would have run. You hoped when the sign screamed, "Let go." You believed he could change, and maybe in another world he would have. But in this one, he didn't. And still, that doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. It makes you brave. This is not a letter to hate him or blame him. It's not even about him anymore. It's about you. The woman who cried quietly so no one would worry, who pretended to be fine, where her world was falling apart, who gave and gave until there was almost nothing left. But you survived. You got up. You left. You chose yourself. And now, you don't owe anyone your silence. Your softness is no longer up for sacrifice. Your love is no longer available to those who cannot carry it with care. So this is your permission slip to stop wondering what you could have done differently, to stop writing endings in your head for a story that was never yours to finish. You don't belong to that pain anymore. You belong to what's next. Goodbye, sweet girl. Thank you for getting us here. I'll take it from here. With love, the woman you became. It happened one morning. No dramatic music. No spiritual awakening. Just me, standing in front of a mirror, bare-faced, hair messy, wrapped in a robe that smelled like lavender and sleep. I looked, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a problem to fix. I didn't see the girl he left. I didn't see the woman who wasn't chosen. I saw someone real. The softness in her eyes, the strength in her jaw, the tiny lines that formed from smiling at her own jokes. I didn't flinch, didn't critique. I just stood there, still, present, and whispered, "Hey, I love you." It felt awkward, silly even, but I meant it, because after all the battles, after all the nights wondering if I was enough, here I was, still standing, still becoming, still mine. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole, because healing doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes, it looks like eye contact in the mirror, without flinching. Sometimes, it looks like saying, "You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be loved by yourself. You are allowed to be here." I used to hide this story, tuck it away like something shameful, like a scar I didn't want anyone to see. I just stood there, still, present, and whispered, "Hey, I love you." It felt awkward, silly even, but I meant it, because after all the battles, after all the nights wondering if I was enough, here I was, still standing, still becoming, still mine. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole, because healing doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes, it looks like eye contact in the mirror, without flinching. Sometimes, it looks like saying, "You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be loved by yourself. You are allowed to be here." I used to hide this story, tuck it away like something shameful, like a scar I didn't want anyone to see when people asked about my past. I'd smile and say, "It's nothing, just life." But inside, it was everything. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the slow unraveling of the girl I used to be, the fire I walked through, barefoot, silent, unseen. And then one day, someone looked at me, eyes full of questions and quiet ache, and said, "How'd you get through it?" I paused, and instead of brushing it off, I told the truth. Not the polished version, not the Instagram-safe summary, but the real story. The tears, the rage, the letting go, the choosing myself, when no one else did. And in that moment, I realized, this story is not my weakness. It's my superpower, because it didn't just shape me, it sharpened me. It didn't destroy me, it defined me. Now, when I tell it, it's not for attention. It's for connection. For the woman still staring at the wedding invitation she'll never attend. For the one who hasn't yet packed her bags. For the girl still hoping he'll call. I tell it for her. For you. For anyone who's ever thought, maybe it's me, because I've been there. And now, I'm not anymore. If I could go back, if I could sit beside the girl I used to be, knees pulled to her chest, eyes full of doubt, heart cracked open from loving too hard, I wouldn't give her advice. I wouldn't rush her healing. I wouldn't even say, you'll be okay. I'd just take her hand, let her cry, let her breathe, let her know she didn't have to be so strong. And then I'd whisper, you were never too much. You were never too loud. You were never the reason they left. You were just love, raw, honest, unfiltered. I'd look her in the eyes and say, one day you'll wake up and you won't miss them. One day you'll look in the mirror and see a woman who is everything you prayed you'd become. And then I'd promise her, you will not disappear. You will not die in this heartbreak. You will rise. You will rebuild. You will love again. But this time, it will begin with you. Because maybe no one ever told her, but I will. You are already enough. And you always were. If I could go back, if I could sit beside the girl I used to be, knees pulled to her chest, eyes full of doubt, heart cracked open from loving too hard, I wouldn't give her advice. I wouldn't rush her healing. I wouldn't even say, you'll be okay. I'd just take her hand, let her cry, let her breathe, let her know she didn't have to be so strong. And then I'd whisper, you were never too much. You were never too loud. You were never the reason they left. You were just love, raw, honest, unfiltered. I'd look her in the eyes and say, one day you'll wake up and you won't miss them. One day you'll look in the mirror and see a woman who is everything you prayed you'd become. And then I'd promise her, you will not disappear. You will not die in this heartbreak. You will rise. You will rebuild. You will love again. But this time, it will begin with you. Because maybe no one ever told her, but I will. You are already enough. And you always were. If you've ever been left out, if you've ever loved someone more than you loved yourself, if you've ever felt invisible in your own story, this is your reminder. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You just need to choose yourself. And when you do, that's when everything changes. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs it. Because healing starts when we tell the truth. And sometimes, your truth becomes someone else's survival.